G'day everyone. In this episode, I'll be going through how I went with my tips for round 16 and a bit of a heart attack game that was the Port Adelaide match to round off the round. So let's get started. The first game was Brisbane against the Western Bulldogs. I went for Brisbane in this game. I thought it'd be a bit closer than it ended up being. It was 42 point or 41 point thumping handed out by Brisbane. I'm not a massive fan of the Thursday night football, but it was quite close up until half time. Dogs got out to an early lead. Brisbane wound them back in, and then just ran over the top of them. Bulldogs definitely looking like a team this year that just have a midfield. Sort of lacking a bit else. It's on both ends of the ground. They got Norton up forward, and I think they'll be a lot better when Bruce comes back. But just down back, they're lacking those real gorilla type key position defenders to lock down on players, and Brisbane just went to town on them. And yeah, it's really interesting where the Dogs are at. They're very much like win loss, win loss. They've got a hard game against Sydney next week, who also lost. So that could be an interesting sort of playoff game, maybe to get into the top 8. Then next up we had Carlton against St Kilda. So I tipped the Blues, but I could tell very early on that the Saints were on. And you can kind of tell with St Kilda, like, if they rocked up for this game or not. And from the first 5-10 minutes, I went, I reckon they're probably going to win here. Carlton looked like they used up a lot of energy in their grand final against Freo last week. And the typical potatoes that rise against Freo weren't anywhere to be seen in St Kilda. I'm talking about guys like Nunes and Cottrell and Newman and these guys. Walsh got a reasonable amount of the ball, but wasn't very effective. But saying that, Carlton still could have won this game. They had enough opportunities in front of goal. Lots of around the body kicks from Mackay. And then Curno's been quite reliable, missed some shots as well. So St Kilda were very efficient in front of goal. It was a bit similar to that Brisbane game where they had quite a few injuries with a nasty head clash between Hunter Clark and Dan Butler. Butler sort of came off and had some blood treated. I'm not sure if he went back on the ground. Clark, I think, ended up having a broken nose, I think it was, but he got stretchered off, which worked a little bit in St Kilda's favour because it got to run the clock for about 3 to 4 minutes, as much as you can in this situation anyway, because I think it was Marshall was off the ground with a concussion rule, so that wound it back. And then they were saying in the broadcast that it's only a 15-minute concussion test, where I'm sure it was always 20, and I'm sure they've always said it was 20 yet. Hamish McLaughlin was like, no, it's 15 minutes. I'm not sure if his brothers just like texted him while he's on the broadcast and said, hey, it's actually 15 minutes. So it's just one of those things where it, be good if the AFL was a professional outfit and actually clearly articulated like what the rules are for each thing. And the commentators were actually on the same page and said that, because they've been saying 20 minutes all the way up until this point, and no one seems to have corrected them until round 16. So, yep, they got to, I think, settle a bit, Saints, and then they got a couple of opportunities to go forward, and Membry kicked some real clutch goals. Bad kicking's bad football, and there was a few of those this week, actually. So, yeah, Saints got up, and then the next game was the Bombers against Sydney. I was out and about while this game was on, but I was listening to a fair chunk of it on radio, and it sounded like Sydney were just running over the top of Essendon. Bombers sort of chip in, get a few goals, but it looked like it was going to be a fairly standard Bombers performance this year where they go down by 40 points, 30, 40 points. But I think in the third quarter it was, Sydney kicked 1 goal, 8. They just really left the door open for the Bombers, who just seemed to flick a switch and just came home with a wet sail and ran over the top of Sydney, 15 goals, 5 to 12-14. So another game where the Carlton St Kilda game was like close for large portions of the game. The Sydney game, they had a massive margin on the Bombers and really just should have put them away. So yeah, a bit of a disappointing one for Sydney. One they probably would have penciled in. They've got tough games coming up. They've got to play Bulldogs and then they've got to play Freo, I think it is. So if they lose those two as well, suddenly they're not in the top 8. So it's not a game they would have thought they'd drop. And it's going to come down to games like this, I think, where you're playing a side you think you should beat and you slip up and that can cost you. Adelaide against Melbourne. I picked Melbourne in this one and they got up about the sort of margin I thought. I thought sort of 20 to 30 points. Adelaide would be competitive, which they were, and they could have actually been up significantly at half time if they just had half decent foot skills. The number of times they butchered the ball and missed really easy opportunities to go forward and kick a couple of goals and put some pressure on Melbourne. With the home crowd behind them, you never know. So at home, Adelaide still bring that sort of pressure and intensity to win the ball. But they're just lacking those players on their list at the moment who can just cut people up with their foot skills. So there's probably still a couple of years off there. Melbourne, just looked really solid. Sort of withstood that pressure and then really put the foot down in the second half. Geelong against North Melbourne, the sort of expected pantsing where Geelong got up by 112 points, I think it was. 144 to 32. Things don't look great at North at the moment. Hearing more chat about the coach and he's probably going to get sacked and all these sorts of things, which isn't any good. But yeah, there's a few things sort of going on at the club at the moment, and I think they've really struggled not having Ben Cunnington out there all year. They're just missing some of those big bodies. Luke Davies-Uniacke, I think, had a fairly decent game, about 30-odd touches, but he didn't have many mates out there. And it's looking pretty grim for the Roos, and might be a few more floggings on the way unless they can sort of pick up the morale a bit and just have a crack at a few teams. You've got nothing to lose. Just go down swinging rather than just sort of meekly into the night. And then the last game on Saturday, which was a cracker, it was Gold Coast against Collingwood. Both teams were pretty guilty for missing some easy opportunities in front of goal. So it sort of balances out there. And ultimately, Collingwood got up here by 5 points. Gold Coast had about a 14-point lead and seemed to just put the cue in the rack or play defensively. Like there was a real shift in their mindset sort of halfway through that last quarter. And that sort of gave Collingwood back the ascendancy. You're playing at home, just put your foot down on the throat, kick one or two more goals and try end it. There was also quite a few curious free kicks not paid in the last minute or so where Gold Coast were heading towards their goal, and Ginnivan just came out from nowhere, sliding across the ground, just took a Gold Coast player out below the legs, no free kick. Few more contests. Sam Collins picks the ball up, holds it for like 1 second. Collingwood player comes around. He kind of like drops it, or it's dislodged by the Collingwood player. And it was holding the ball. And so Collingwood got a free kick in the middle of the ground and just wound the clock down. And that was pretty much game over. So not saying Gold Coast would necessarily have, converted a free kick inside 50 into a goal. But sort of robbed the game of that sort of final climax moment there. But yeah, Collingwood just keep finding a way to win, and you never know. They've got I think their draw actually opens up quite a bit. I think they play North next week. They play some of the teams sort of at the lower end of the ladder in the next couple of weeks. So opportunity for them to string a few more games together and push towards the top four. So none of those top four sides want to slip up. And some of them have got some tough games as well. So you don't know. Maybe Collingwood are a sneaky chance of stealing a top four position from someone, which you wouldn't have thought of at the start of the year and even a couple of rounds in when they hadn't gone too well and they'd lost to West Coast. Tigers against West Coast. So I thought the Tigers would win quite easily. A bit of a scary moment for West Coast flying over and having some engine troubles on their plane, but fortunately they were okay for that. They got out to about a 40-point lead, Richmond, and I thought this was game done and dusted. Here comes another big thumping for West Coast, and then they came roaring back and got it down to about 11 points. And then the Tigers put another gap on them. So they're still looking fairly competitive, West Coast, compared to the start of the year. They are going to bother some teams at home, particularly. I think some of the defensive two-way running still not there. So teams, you got half decent foot skills and aerobic capacity, I think you can still put it on West Coast. Elliot Yeo being injured again is a big out for them. It sounds like he's out for the year. And I think it was smart for them to be playing him down half back. He clearly wasn't at the right level to play midfield, but he's still a pretty good player. So get him on the field down half back and at least get him contributing with some of his aerial prowess, his physicality, his ball skills and stuff. And that'll be a big one out for them. With McGovern still out as well. So moving on to the Sunday games, the coin toss game that was GWS and Hawthorn. I went Hawthorn. They were up for periods of the game, but then GWS rolled over the top of them. I did think about changing this tip, seeing some of the results earlier in the round, but I stuck by what I put on the video. So, I didn't watch it. I was sort of travelling to go see Freo against Port Adelaide. Oh, the range of emotions in this game. So, bit of a flat start. I was feeling a bit nervous going to the game. I felt quite confident this year, actually, for most of our home matches. And this one, I just had a bit of a sinking feeling. We've got a really good record against Port at home. They've got a really good record against us in Adelaide. It's very much a home ground fixture in terms of who wins. But I was just having really nervous moments about that semi-final back in 2014 where they eliminated us. They ran over the top of us. And that actually is almost exactly what happened in this game. We were a bit slow coming out of the blocks. They kicked the first 3 goals. I was wondering if the team I was watching had bothered to come out of the change rooms. Woke from their slumber and piled on the next 3 goals and went into quarter time, scores even. And then they decided, we're the team that's too big, too strong, in my old mate Sean Darcy's words, and really just piled on the goals. We ended up kicking something like 14-6 after their initial barrage. So we were up by about 34 points at 3/4 time. So we're up by 40, and I think they kicked a late one just before 3/4 time. And I thought, here we go, some opportunities to, maybe boost our percentage a bit in an unexpected game. I wasn't going into this thinking it would be an easy win. And then Port just came out of nowhere. It was a bit of an arm wrestle early on. Then Dixon kicks a ridiculous one from the boundary, and then he goes in for the centre bounce, wins it, and kicks another goal. And then they were suddenly up and about, Port Adelaide, and they trimmed the margin back. And I thought, here we go. And then Robbie Gray got a free. He marked it. And I thought, not Robbie Gray. Like, this bloke's a dead eye and always kicks clutch goals. He missed. He didn't even score. And then Marshall, who's one of the most accurate tall forwards in the comp, he also missed. So we benefited a bit from our poor goal kicking, but I think it also is a bit of a testament to us kicking straight from most of our opportunities we'd had in the game earlier. I think Lob was the only one that missed one that was sort of reasonably in front from a set shot, but he kicked 5 goals once, so I think everyone was pretty accurate and took their chances. And that's what scoreboard pressure kind of helps you do, is you bank those opportunities, you get ahead, and Port Adelaide just threw everything at us, like nothing to lose. If they lose this game, they probably can't make finals. Let's just throw caution to the wind. They were playing very aggressive. There were times where if they turned the ball over or lost it, we would have burnt them and destroyed them going the other way with an easy goal out the back, which is one of the goals we did kick. But the ball was just bouncing their way. We couldn't win a free kick for holding the ball against them. They'd soccer it off the ground and it was going to their players, and then they'd just be out the back. And so they were just chancing their arm. And that's kind of what you have to do at that many points down. They were 34 points down. You may as well go down by 60 and try. And that's what they did. On a different day, we intercept some of those plays. They fumble the ball a couple of times. We go down the other end, punish them, kick 2 goals, and it's game over. So it's just one of those ones where, the rub of the green, I think, just sort of went their way. Just in sort of like the general umpiring stuff as well. It was a bit, it was a bit heated at the ground, let's just say. And not the sort of usual armchair ride we're sort of used to at home. Not that Freo get a massive armchair ride like West Coast do, but we get, like, I'd say, a 60-40 sort of blend our way. And it was probably a bit more 70-30 Port Adelaide's way. We got a couple, but they got maybe 4 goals in that first half from non-called free kicks where it then went down the other end and they scored. You can tell I'm not still bitter about it. So, who played really well for us? I thought Rory Lobb was really good, 5 goals. Sean Darcy, very good in the ruck, and that was reflected in the coaches' votes. I thought Jordan Clark was very good as well. And then just had some real solid contributors. I thought Brayshaw was just solid all day. He had a great effort on Finlayson to sort of push him, and that was the one goal we got in the 4th quarter where it went up the other end. I think all the forwards had just solid games, getting it up there when the ball actually got up there. Aish was dominant as well. It's probably the best game he's played for us. 2 goals and just under 30 touches. A few of the guys sort of faded out in that 4th quarter when they're running over the top of us, but I think some of that was just them, that sort of the rub of the green stuff I was saying, where the ball sort of bounced their way. Mundy was solid from last week. He was hitting targets. He just looked like he'd, within himself, said, I've got to make amends for last week. So yeah, a lot of solid performances. I think Cox must be playing a bit injured. He looked a bit laconic, more so than usual. There was one where it was bouncing on the goal line. He didn't really like dive or stretch out or anything. I'm hearing he was getting a lot of work on his hip. So he might be playing with something. I thought Wilson played really well in his 150th. I thought Luke Ryan was solid. I think he's still getting over the flu. It's just a game you have to win. I think at the end of the day, I would have taken an 8-point win over Port Adelaide. It's just the way the game played out. It could have been a much bigger margin. But I think Port are a much better team. Like, they played in a prelim last year. So they're a decent side. They've still got a lot of players there. You look at their mids, like they've got Wines, who really got going in that last quarter. They got Boak, who had a pretty quiet night up until that last quarter. And Rosie, he was really good. He's sort of come on in the last couple of months where Hinkley's been playing him in the middle. He looked like quicker than like most players out there, and in the middle essentially, the middle especially. And our team isn't the fastest in the middle, particularly. So if you've got Mundy and Brody, I think if you've got midfielders with pace, you can burn them off. And so unless they've got a one-on-one matchup with either Brayshaw or Sarong, I think that's probably where you can get our midfield at the moment. And Rosie's a bit bigger than, say, someone like Sarong. So he has pace and core strength. I saw him just shrug off a couple of people sometimes. Like, going at a decent pace and they can't really get their arms around him. And with that speed and core strength, just sort of able to shrug out of the tackles and get into some dangerous position running out of the front and stoppages and stuff. So pretty happy to get the win. Sort of on reflection, on the night I was probably a bit down a bit. It felt like we'd lost the game. So we'll see how we go next week against Port Adelaide. Let me know how you thought of the round. I ended up getting 5 tips right. I think I'm sort of done from a tipping comp perspective and probably a bit too far back. Leave me a like and I'll see you all next time for my preview for the next round. Catch you all later. Bye.